July 22nd. Here's what's going on in Ukraine. And the big news today is the agreement between Ukraine and Russia and the UN about unblocking food and grain transportation. But before that, I'm going to feed that into a wider narrative because if you don't know me, my name is Darren Gertis, and I do these daily updates about what's going on in Ukraine as I update my book. Okay, so here's what we see here. Russian forces dig in as bloody Ukrainian counterattack is anticipated. Yes, it's about to happen in the south. The Russians are digging in. The Ukrainians are getting ready. It's going to be a bloodbath. Okay, next article. Slovansk among eastern cities shelled one day on the day that the grain deal is signed, and yes, they're still shelling. Yes, it's still bad, and it's going to continue to get worse. Slovansk is up here. They're going to be attacking down here in the south and trying to recapture some of this land. The Ukrainians will be, and we'll see how this all plays out. Pravda. Pravda, now I triangulate with a number of things. Like, so you just saw The Guardian and Radio Free Europe. But I like to hear what the Russian perspective is, just for at least for the fun of the Funhouse mirror effect. Um, but here we are with Pravda, and I'll do some RT articles as well. Russia reports destruction of 4 U.S.-made HIMARS in systems in Ukraine. Lieutenant General Igor Konashov says that we've destroyed the 4th launcher, whatever. But if you go into other articles, and this is that Radio Free Europe article I was just reading, Kyiv hopes that its gradually increasing supply of Western arms, such as U.S. high-mobility rocket systems, will allow it to recapture lost territories. The United States said on July 22nd, that's today, that it has signed off on another 270 million, bringing the number 4 more HIMARS number up to 20. Now, Zelensky asked for 300. They're a long way from that, but nonetheless, 20 is better than the initial 4 that they had. The Russian Defense Ministry said that his forces has destroyed 4 HIMARS this month. U.S. officials said these reports were not true. So I'm not sure that you can trust Pravda when Pravda has reported about all kinds of things that were not actually true. Okay, next, this is The Guardian, the British Guardian. Ukraine and Russia sign UN-backed deal to restart grain exports. UN Secretary General said it's a beacon of hope shining bright in the Black Sea. In Kyiv, there's a deep skepticism about Russia's intentions, but an advisor to the Ukrainian president said that Ukraine was trusting the UN and Turkey to police the agreement. A coalition of Turkish and Ukraine and UN staff will monitor the loading of grain vessels, and then Ukrainians will pilot it through these commercial line through the mines, and then the vessels will cross the Black Sea. And so hopefully this will get out and food prices will stabilize. Okay, here's why this is important. So this is a USDA agricultural production and trade sheet. If you look at how much exports, this is Ukraine. Ukraine exports 20% of sunflower, 36% of sunflower oil, 41% of sunflower meal, 16% of rapeseed, and yeah, so it's pretty significant. The Russians also export a lot too. Like, this is just wheat around the world. Russia exports more wheat than anyone else in the world, followed by the U.S. and Ukraine's down here in number 4. So this agreement's not just going to help Ukraine; it's going to help Russia, alas, to be able to sell their wheat. Now, this is going to help Russia for a whole different reason. Now, watch this. This is RT. This is Russian television, RT. And this is what Russia is hearing about this. A deal to unblock the much-awaited grain exports from Ukraine was signed, but UN brokered talks in Istanbul. True. Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, and his Turkish counterpart signed an agreement with the UN Secretary General, while the Ukrainian infrastructure minister signed a separate document with Turkey as well. Guterres described the signing as a beacon of relief in the world. We just heard that. Wheat deliveries from Ukraine, a major producer, were disrupted after Russia launched its military operation in a neighboring state late February. Like, oh, this thing that was going on over here. The sides previously blamed each other for causing the crisis. Okay, but Ukraine was right. There was no crisis before Russia invaded. Okay, Western officials have accused Russia of deliberately preventing the shipments by blockading the country's Black Sea. Without the Russian Navy being there, that wouldn't be a problem. Now, Moscow has insisted that Ukraine made the shipments impossible by laying naval mines outside of the ports, including Odessa. Well, they had to do that because otherwise you would have invaded from the sea, and they couldn't do that. So it's like telling the truth, but not telling the truth at the same time. It's a really bizarre thing. So the question is, can this agreement with Russia be trusted? And it's still an open question. Now, why is Russia doing this? Well, Russia is doing this because they're going to be able to sell a lot of their grain, just like I said here. I mean, they're the biggest exporter of wheat, so it's going to be a net good for them. Now, Russia's doing this because they can sell their grain, but there's another reason. Russia will deliver contractually promised food, fertilizer, energy, and other commodities to Africa, despite difficulties created by Western sanctions. The Western sanctions, they're the bad guys to blame. We are well aware, this is Lavrov, we are well aware of the importance of Russian supplies of socially important commodities, including food, to many countries around the world. We are mindful that these supplies play an important role in preserving social stability. And then a little bit further, it's essential that all our African friends understand that Russia will continue to fulfill in good faith its obligations in international contracts with regard to export of food, fertilizers, energy, and other goods vital for Africa, the Russian foreign minister wrote, and Moscow is taking all measures to this end. And Russia does not impose anything on anyone or tell others how to live, which I choked when I read that line, which the Ukrainians might beg to differ. We treat with great respect the sovereignty of the states of Africa and their inalienable right to determine the path of their own development. Why are they sucking up to Africa? Well, because they have to. Now that they've been pushed out of the West or by the sanctions, they're no longer allowed to play with the West. Like they had a lock on their energy supplies, and they were playing reasonably nicely with the West before Ukraine. And now that they can't, they're looking elsewhere. They're looking to the BRICS. That's Brazil, India, China, Russia is BR, and South Africa, but they're trying to expand that to Iran and Argentina and Africa. And so that's why we're seeing this. And so this grain deal is actually a net benefit for, and it's going to help Ukraine, but it's a bigger benefit, I think, for Russia, alas. Okay, Russia is taking hundreds in casualties daily. This is a article in Reuters. The United States believes that the Russian military is suffering hundreds of casualties, especially when you're dealing with like junior officers, lieutenants, and captains. Thousands of them. The United States estimate was at 15,000 killed and 45,000 wounded. Now that's a very conservative figure. The Brits were at that figure about a month ago. Russia classifies military deaths as state secrets, even in times of peace. So whatever the Russians are saying or whatever leaks out is, I wouldn't believe. This was a full month after the war. They said only 1,300 Russian soldiers had been killed. At that time, there were at least many thousands. So, but they won't talk about how many there are. And so, just to now, I'm showing you this article that came out today because the question is how much faith you can put into this trade agreement. I don't know. I mean, I think it'll help the Russians, but I don't know that they wouldn't break it if they saw an opportunity to, say, seize Odessa. For the Kremlin, Ukraine's endgame is a moving target. Here's why I'm showing you this one, because demilitarization and denazification, keeping Ukraine out of NATO, preventing genocide in the Donbas, and now a land grab, seizing territory with an eye toward incorporation into Russia. For Kremlin, there have been various justifications and goals, and the goalposts keep changing. Lavrov announced Kremlin's territorial ambitions in Ukraine had expanded. Now the geography is different, he said. It is not just Donetsk and Luhansk, it's Kherson, Zaporizhia, and a number of other territories, and they still wish that they could get all of Ukraine. There's another rationale that the Kremlin has brandished: genocide. Russian officials have falsely claimed for years that the Kyiv government was committing genocide against Russian speakers, particularly in the eastern Donbas. Hitler used the same thing. That's why he invaded Poland, because Germans were being oppressed by the Poles, allegedly, and so that's why he went in. The Ukrainians are making the Russians pay for every inch of territory that they gain, said General Mark Miley earlier this week. Stefan Meisler, a Russian specialist at the German Council on Foreign Relations, said, then Lavrov says something we already know, that the Russian leadership has not given up the whole effort to take Ukraine, and as soon as they are able to do it, and if the West is not supporting Ukraine sufficiently, they will do it. If they can expand, they're going to expand. That's why we're saying, is the agreement worth the paper it's printed on? And I'm arguing, maybe not. You decide. I'm just reporting what's in the news. Okay, analysis. Putin bets on ancient weapon in Ukraine. Time. It's not just about missiles. He believes that the longer that this goes on, Putin's betting that an ancient weapon is more powerful than missiles. It's time. Russia is hoping that Western resolve will be sapped, and that could very well be. Um, Here, Russian officials on state TV openly gloat about the fall of British and Italian ministers, but listen to what they're saying. Boris Johnson and the Italian Prime Minister both resigned. And they say that as a result of self-harming sanctions the West imposed on Russia. And they're asking who's the next leader to fall. Well, Biden's going to get hammered in the November elections, and we all know it. I mean, it's just like the president in power generally loses seats in Congress, but it's going to be a big change this year. That's my prediction, at least. And the Russians are going to say that's because of these Western sanctions, but that's not it. Putin's bet is that he can succeed in grinding war of attrition, says CIA Director William Burns. Putin is betting that he can strangle the Ukrainian economy, wear down the European publics and leaderships, and that he can wear down the U.S. because, in Putin's view, America always suffers from attention deficit disorder and will, get distracted by something else, said Burns. Okay, so that's what Putin's depending on, and that's why we're wondering, is this agreement worth the paper it's printed on? Okay, finally, the Donbass republics ban Google. That's a terrible sign. You won't be able to get any legitimate news there, and that's going to be very, very bad. The West will not let Russia do away with the war quickly. This is Pravda saying it's the West. They're not allowing the war to end. We want peace, but they won't. Okay, we have been dragged into a war that the West will not let us leave. No, you started a war. We've armed the Ukrainians and they're fighting back. That's not the same thing. Therefore, they make us experience a war of attrition, even for 10 years. Russia wants NATO to go back to its 1997 borders. I bet it does. But the reason why it's not is because you abused Lithuania. I've been there. You abused Romania. I've been there. You abused Bulgaria. I've been there. They don't want to go back. Poland doesn't want to go back. It's like you abused your girlfriend and now she's running to the arms. Like you're a biker dude and you're abusing your girlfriend. She's like, I'm getting away, and runs to the arms of the football player. And that's the West, right? And now she doesn't want to go back. Of course you want her back. You want to go back to the 1997 borders, but they don't because you tyrannized them for years when you were the Soviet Union. Now, the article ends. This is improv to remember. The West is very tempted to strike a nuclear blow on Russia that we would not be able to respond to. No, the West does not want that at all, but this is what they're hearing in their media. And so that's why I think that this is kind of a really dangerous thing that they're hearing, and they're only hearing this. They're not able to compare like I am. The U.S. intends to recognize Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. That's actually in the works, and they may very well be doing that. Here are other countries. They will be joined by Cuba, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. And they're all chummy with these guys, the same characters. When we get down to the end, within this framework of the American methodology, plus is being replaced with minus, black is being repainted into white, and a propaganda campaign is being carried out to make everyone believe that the terrorist here is Russia. You're a terrorist. You're a terrorist when you bomb civilians. That's the Geneva Convention says this is a war crime. Okay. Russia's response is grinding the Ukrainian military infrastructure, denazification, and a solid foreign policy campaign, just like during the recent summit in Tehran. Russia is, and this is why this article is important, Russia is creating a new pole of influence. That's what they're trying to do with Africa, with the foodstuffs. This is why, I keep talking about, is it worth the paper it's printed on? I think the answer is yes. And it's surprising, but I think the answer is yes because they actually do want to do this. They're creating a new pole of influence, bringing together the countries that do not want to submit to the Western system. The Ukraine regime will soon be dismantled, they say. The European countries will ask for peace, they say, because most likely they'll face very severe economic and social crisis. But it's this, bringing together these countries that do not want to be part of the Western system. So he's talking about like African countries, Iran, Syria, things along those lines, and trying to create its own. So they want to have a bipolar world where the West, led by the U.S., instead of a unipolar world is counterbalanced by the BRICS Plus. So that's why I believe, and I could be wrong, that the Russian agreement is actually worth the paper it's printed on. But like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. Okay, that's all I have for today.